Are we ready? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the April meeting of the San Antonio chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas meeting. Let's see. It's not, there we go. All right, we always like to start by welcoming any new members. Do we have any new members in the room with us? Yes, in the back. Thank you so much. Right here, another one. Awesome. And also, any visitors? Do we have any new visitors with us tonight? Yes, we've got a couple in here as well. Awesome. Thank you. And then, of course, any returning members. Thank you so much. I am hearing a lot of feedback. Is that, do y'all hear that? Oh, it's not me. It's something else. It sounds like breathing, but it's not breathing. It's something else. Okay, sorry. I don't know what that is. We'll try not to. That sound. Sounds like a chair. It might be just in the room. It's amplified though.
You want to try to mute the PC and see what happens?
I did.
You did? Okay.
So we'll just deal with it. We also wanted to take a minute to thank everybody that is watching us on Zoom right now. We don't always do that, but we realize we have quite a few members who are unable to join us in person here. And so we wanted to just let you all know that we are thinking about you and we miss you. And we're really happy that you're able to join us on Zoom. And we have a lot of volunteers here to thank for this ability for us to do these meetings in this hybrid style. So thank y'all very much for joining us. Okay, we've got a really important weekend coming up. It's the City Nature Challenge, and Peter Hernandez is going to come up and talk a little bit about this.
Thank you. And I know y'all been listening to this. I know Jared's been talking about the last 2 months. I've been talking about since like November, September, really to tell you the truth. But I want to say 3 and a half things. And I'll tell you what the half is later. Number 1 is thank you, Native Plant Society of San Antonio. They are our first sponsors to give us donations back in January. They are our champion sponsors of the City Nature Challenge. So thank you to all of y'all for being sponsors. That's number 1. Thank you. Number 2, how many have joined the city or joined iNaturalist already? Okay, good. How many have joined the City Nature Challenge, the project itself? Okay, not so many, but that's okay. That's good. We're still in that's okay. As long as you're doing observations between the 29th or the 26th to the 29th, you're doing good. Now, here's the big question. This year, we're doing community nature challenge. So we've been challenging other cities, but now we're challenging amongst ourselves. We're trying to build community amongst ourselves. So we're all Native Plant Society folks, or we love natives. And so we built a community native challenge group for the Native Plant Society. So how many have joined that group? Okay, you got 1, 2. Okay, so we're down in the slumps there. We want you to join this, and I'll put it out on the Zoom when I get back to my PC over there. I'm normally behind the scenes. I'm not here. I'm at home. But nevertheless, join it. If you can't scan it from here, I'll pass this around, and you could scan it and join it. Those that are on iNaturalist, those that don't know iNaturalist, I have a table over here with some 1, 2, 3 instructions, and then on here is how to get into iNaturalist or log in and get you to the app itself. Okay, so that's number 2. So join the Native Plant Society Community Nature Challenge, and that's not only San Antonio chapter, but San Antonio metro area is actually 12 counties that we count as part of our challenge or part of our group, and we're competing against Dallas, Houston, Austin, and actually there's about almost 700 cities across the globe that are actually participating in this bioblitz. So that's really big. It was 600 a month ago, and it's like zoomed up. Last year was only less than 500. So people are across the world are actually getting involved with it. We, as a community, so in our 12 counties, we have 5 chapters. So we're all banding together to be the Community Nature Challenge for the Native Plant Society. So that's number 2. If you can join it, great. Be part of that. It does bring some little bit of community. When you do iNaturalist, everybody thinks I know my plants. I'm not as good as Jerry over there or Cleve, but with my iNaturalist and the AI helping me, I look pretty good. Not really, but I get to learn plants a lot quicker, exponentially. At least when I joined back in 2015, I was clueless, and now I think I know some of my plants very good. That's number 2. Number 3 is you could start in your backyard making observations between 26th and 29th. But we also have over 51 events going on across the 12 counties. So out of 12 counties, only 1 county did not have an event. But in Bexar County, if you live in Bexar County, we have the city's doing one. And I don't know if y'all noticed a sign over here that says City Nature Challenge. The city of San Antonio has really gotten behind it, at least the Parks and Rec. So they're really pushing it. They have like 10 or 12 events going on. So there's lots of events to go to if you want to lead walk. That's awesome. That's number 3. So find the event on your little ruler if you got it. It does have our website. Go to it. It has all the events and it has a map of where they are close to you. That's number 3. And at 3.5, I know Jerry, I'll let him do it, but last month he was talking about team tournaments. That's great. That's teams of 6. I think he's still taking teams, and he'll take your info, but I'm here for Community Nature Challenge, and y'all joining the City Nature Challenge via the Native Plant Society web project. Okay, so you must join it. And just a real quick note, you'll probably say, well, if I join it, does it go away from the city nature? Well, actually, observations could go 1 to many. So 1 to many, you could go to Native Plant Society. You could go to, if you're in the Audubon, so forth. Also, there's also campuses, nature challenges that are going on. If you went to UTSA versus Trinity or UIW, they're all having their own individual challenge. So you could join those too. All right, well, that's all I have to say, and thank you, and back to Lee. And if you have any questions, I cannot pick up this ruler. It's like stuck to the floor.
Thank you, Peter.
Anyway, thank you.
Yes, if you've got questions, Peter will stick around. He knows he's got all the answers. Yeah. Okay. Now we mentioned this last month, but we want to say it again because it's this weekend and it's actually perfect timing for the City Nature Challenge. And it's the 4th Saturday Nature Walk Series Wildflower Walk with Jerry Morrissey. And Jerry was going to come up here. There he is. It's going to be meeting here at 8 a.m. at the Urban Ecology Center, April 27th. But he also has a couple of other walks that are going on that you might be interested in as well.
Yeah, so because we have 51 walks and some of them are on weekdays, I'm trying to promote a couple of them that are going to be on Friday and on Monday. On Friday, we're going to have Ken Butler, who's a preeminent avid bird photographer. We're going to open up Roberts Ranch YMCA, which is above Comfort. It has a stream through there. It has it's going to be a fantastic place to do iNaturalist observations. We should be able to see 150, 200 plants, all kind of birds, all kind of stuff there. But we've got a few signups, but it's 9 o'clock on, and I've got you can talk to me later about it. It's actually the first one. If you go to City Nature Challenge site there, it doesn't say Roberts Ranch, but it's the first one at 9 o'clock on Friday. So we're looking for folks to come up and enjoy this great place. I've been up there before. It's not open very often to the public, so this is a great opportunity if you have some time on Friday to come up and see a really unique hill country place. The other one that I wanted to promote is on Monday morning. It's at Merle Haggard's ranch on the southeast Bexar County, about at Atascosa, and she's converting it into conservancy property and stuff. It's got a big lake on it, so it's got another lot of different kinds of habitat on it. Very, the Audubon folks go out there all the time for birding, and so there's gonna be birds, plants, whatever. So anyhow, talk to me about either one of those. Beside the one here, you know, it's gonna be like from 8 to 10 o'clock, and we're gonna walk the loop around here, look at the plants. And if we wanna walk a few other areas and look for some other plants, I can stay after 10 and we can go do a little more exploring around here also on that. So anyhow, lots of great events, 51 of them. Get out and do some, for sure.
Okay, if you've never been out on a plant walk with Jerry, you need to make the time. All right, we have a few thank yous. We had a few events over the past month. One of them was a plant sale at Pollinatives benefiting our chapter. So we want to thank the volunteers. We also want to thank Pollinatives. It was a great opportunity for us, and Donald is here. He has something for us.
Also, yes, I'd like to thank all the volunteers that came out and helped everybody, and everybody that came and shopped. I was invited just today for a state NIPSOT call where they're strategizing how to get growers to grow more native plants. And the best way to do that is to show them that they sell, because growers will grow what sells. So continue to promote native plants to your friends and neighbors and people who are not at these type of meetings. Appreciate all that work. And then the results of the sale, we raised $2,000 for the native plants.
Amazing, thank you so much. Donald has some really awesome plants, and even when I go there without any plans of buying something, I always see something I need. Thank you again. Also, we want to say thank you to the volunteers that came out to the workday at Haven for Hope Pollinator Garden. We had quite a few that came from HEB, and then we had a few I saw in the room here that joined us as well. Our normal volunteers. The garden is looking really spectacular, and it was a fun time. So thank you to everybody. And Steve and his crew there have been doing a really good job maintaining that garden. And then we also want to thank our volunteers for helping to educate on native plants and our organization at the Women's Club Fiesta Flower Show, as well as say congratulations to Haley, who got a first place ribbon for her magnificent native flowers. I mean, what can compete with this Monarda, right? Gorgeous, right? Okay, we're still looking for some volunteers for the Festival of Flowers that's coming up in June. So we have a little bit of time, but if you're interested, it's Saturday, June 8th. We've got a couple of shifts. The first one from 8:30 to noon, the second one from noon to 3:30. If you're interested, please go to nipsotsavolunteers@gmail.com or talk to Pam in the back of the room if you're here tonight. It's a great event. And then something else that we thought y'all would be interested in, look at this magnificent painting. There is a new exhibition about to open at the Central Library here in San Antonio. It's called Under the Lens, Flowers, Pollinators, and Us. And it is paintings exploring the extraordinary life of flowers through image and word by artist and NIPSOT member Norma Jean Moore and poets of the Stone and the Stream. And so it's going to be open May 14th through June 15th. The actual exhibition opening is Tuesday, May 14th from 6 to 8 p.m. And then there's a really interesting artist panel with some activities on Saturday, May 18th from 1 to 2. Look at, isn't that gorgeous? All right, our next chapter meeting is May 28th. And we've got Rufus Stevens coming to talk about the latest version of the book, Land Stewardship for Birds, A Guide for Central Texas. So that should be really good. It is hot off the presses. I don't even know if it's quite yet available. It's about to be available, if not. So we're one of the first groups to hear about this latest version of this book. And then, of course, tonight, we're very excited to have Zach Ritchie here, who is the San Antonio Botanical Garden Conservation and Collections Technician. And he's going to be talking to us about identification tools for native plant ID. I'm sure he's going to tell you about some special plants he brought over there, but he brought some very special plants that are in our Plants by Donation. So thank you, Zach. We're going to transition to his presentation.
While they're getting set up, I have a giveaway for a $25 Pollinatives gift card donated by Donald Gerber. So the lucky winner is last 3 digits 983. 983. All right, we got a winner. Okay.
If you want to go to the end, and I'll be taking questions on Chanel, and then we'll try to, once we get to questions at the end, repeat because of the Zoom.
Got it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, hello. Good evening. Thanks, Lee. Thank you, Native Plant Society, for having me out tonight. We are big fans at the garden, just because, you know, native plants are a good thing. So a little bit about myself. I work at San Antonio Botanical Garden, and we do, it's Michael Easton and I, and we do the native plant conservation and collections program. Like, we acquire plants from the garden that aren't always native, but the majority of things that we are collecting out in the wild, these are wild genetics that we're bringing into the garden and distributing to other institutions. So there's a lot to unpack there. So let me give you a little brief introduction. I'm sure a lot of you have the answer to these questions already, but let's humor me for the sake of. So what is conservation, right? Like, how are we going to define this, put it into a box? Conservation is described as the principle of protecting natural resources and restricting their use by human impact. It's very specific wording right there, how we phrase this. And there are 2 types of conservation that we actively perform. One is land conservation, and this one is a little self-explanatory, right? This is preserving pieces of land that are undisturbed or don't, you know, currently have any kind of human infrastructure, have not been developed, and keeping them that way. Simple as that. The second kind is genetic conservation, which is really what we're in the business of. And that's when we're going out and we're purposely finding these wild genetics, you know, non-cultivated plants. These are wild occurring individuals who are actively procreating and making seed, or we're taking cuttings or whatever that method is, we're propagating that material, and then we're either planting that in the garden or usually distributing that to either the general public or to other institutions. Why do we do this? Well, it's pretty obvious, but we'll make it a little darker than that. The US loses around 50 acres of farmland every hour, right? Average. 2 million acres a year are lost to development, and 650 acres of land are developed in Texas every day. So these are pretty staggering numbers, right? When you think about the fact that less than 95% of the state is publicly accessible land. And when you keep ticking off all these other boxes, when you eliminate roadside easements, when you eliminate government land, when you eliminate all these other, you know, technically public land, you end up with about 1.2% of Texas that's publicly accessible. And this is where we're finding plants. So if you have property, holler at me. We need your information. What's the result of this, right? Habitat isolation, habitat loss, species isolation. So habitat loss, again, pretty self-explanatory. Habitat's there, habitat's gone, it's lost. Species isolation is a bit more complicated, right? A lot of our plants are obligate outcrossers. They need another individual to pollinate them so they can produce viable seed. If they're not producing viable seed, it's functionally extinct. So when we isolate these populations from one another, pollinators can only travel so far. If you're not wind pollinated, that puts a lot of restrictions on your range. And so when we separate these populations by one roadside after the next, we cut them down for ranch land, we allow cows to overgraze, like these are the results. We have functionally extinct species in the wild. And Anthropocene killed the Holocene star. You know, the Anthropocene is the next big extinction level event. We categorize the epochs on our planet by how many species go extinct. We've lost over 50% of the biodiversity on this planet since, you know, humans have become the dominant force. So it's categorized as an extinction level event. The Holocene was the era that was very even climate-wise. We had a lot of opportunity for things to grow and develop, and we're past that point now. We're in the Anthropocene. So let's tackle the scariest topic first. I get a lot of headaches and glazed eyes when we talk about taxonomy. So we're going to make this, trying to make it a little bit fun, right? It is a controversial topic, not just between the general public and scientists, but in the scientific community. Taxonomy is controversial because we're always changing these names. And the reasons why is because we want to separate and group these individual species with unique identities. Every species needs its own name, right? Binomial names, binomial, 2 names, genus, species. This is how we categorize all living things currently as we understand them on the planet. So this gives us a very specific way to draw those lines. And we do that with this big fancy word, molecular phylogenetics. Phylogenesis is evolutionary development and diversification of a species. Like simply put, this is just how things change and grow and develop. We call that phylogenesis. Well, with molecular phylogenetics, we are doing this by basically making plant smoothies and looking at them under a microscope, right? We take a bunch of plant material, we grind it up, we make a paste, and we separate that with chemicals slowly over time, and then we isolate the compounds we want to look at, and then we can identify DNA, genetic alleles, all these markers that allow us to separate these things. This is why things are constantly changing taxonomically, because, well, we're, you know, this is frontier science, baby. So we do this a lot. Why? Because we have a lot of confusing common names in the world, don't we? Yeah. So there are some helpful ones though, like we're going to tackle common names like sumac, right? For the genus Rhus. All the sumacs, you know, have those same qualities. And Rhus is one of my favorite. Hickory, this is where your pecans hang out, right? Pecan is a hickory. We have 13 species in Texas. The genus Caria. Those are very simple, very easy to identify. Sumacs are pretty easy to tell apart. Hickories also pretty easy to tell apart. So the less helpful ones would be something like sage. We call a lot of things sages that aren't salvias, right? Or coneflower. Is it an echinacea? Is it retibita? You know, which one is it? We have a lot of these overlapping identities. This also results in some very odd nomenclature that is still kind of in practice today, like the genus Tradescantia. Spiderwort is great. It works just fine. There's a really weird, like, Wandering Jew is the name that's been associated with this genus for a long time. It's just really odd to bring ethnicity into plant science. I don't understand the connection. I really just think spiderwort is more fun. So here's how these things are organized, right? It's an upside down pyramid. You know, it's the reverse of the food pyramid. It gets bigger when you go up. So we tackle this in a specific order, right? Kingdom is the most broad. You have so many species contained into one kingdom. When you think about kingdoms, you think about the kingdom of fungi, you know, or animalia. And as you go further down that pyramid, you begin to isolate and get things more and more narrow. So they're organized from their most general to most specific. There are more species contained in the groups at the top rather than the bottom. Things are refined to small groups, narrowed down into an individual species as they're filtered, right? And you can kind of see how this is organized. This is a freaky flow. Does anyone know what this plant is right here? Come on. It's Cenizo, that's right. So let's talk about this one a little bit. Let's try and isolate this plant. We'll walk you through the taxonomic nomenclature of this one. So this is a really good way to organize this thought-wise. Instead of thinking about that pyramid and, you know, thinking about all the different families that are contained in one class or order, we're going to talk about just, you know, really simple stuff, narrow it down with this little diagram. Life forms are organized for maximum efficiency, right? It benefits us to follow this lineage back. That explains the origin of species, and it also helps us, make some connections with, morphology. And so Cenizo, right, is in eukarya, not very specific. Eukaryotes are defined as organisms that have DNA contained in an isolated nucleus. Well, that's very helpful for identifying, isn't it? Tracheophyta is the kingdom. Tracheophytes are a little bit more specific, right? We're actually dialing in on a certain type of organism, like something that has roots. Plantae, okay, more specific. Now we're isolating different types of things that we consider plants. Some things that may look like plants but are in the phylum Plantae, right? And then Magnoliopsida, it's pretty close to something that we recognize, right? We're starting to see a little bit of that lineage, right? The Magnolia class. And then Lamiales. This one can get really confusing, and that's sometimes why this plant is identified as a sage, because it has a lot of kind of similar qualities because of the order it's in, Lamiales, which contains the family Lamiaceae, salvias. But this one, Scrophulariaceae. There's your hard left. This is why this is not a sage, because immediately we have some distinction. There aren't a lot of scrophs in Texas, but this is a very common one. This is a South Texas endemic, and you'll see it a lot in the area I was just in. So you'll notice that the family name is italicized. You're doing scientific nomenclature, this is where that begins. So this is contained in the genus Leucophilum. And so as we start to go down, we're starting to see this is getting more and more specific, right? And then the species, Leucophilum frutescens. We always use the binomial name when we're describing species. There are a lot of other frutescens out there with that species epithet, but you won't find another Leucophilum frutescens. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the stuff that we like, looking at plants, right? The morphology in the mirror. Let's do a little exercise with the room. I'm freezing, so if you're cold, this is going to get your blood flowing a little bit, hopefully. Human morphology, right? This is something that we're all pretty familiar with at this point. Is a subject over 6 feet tall? Anybody? You over 6 feet? I can't be the only one in the room. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Appreciate that. Well, how many knuckles between how many hairs between the first 2 knuckles? I'll give you a second. Go ahead and count. Is hair present on top of head? This is not true for all of us. Fingers crossed, maybe. Freckles present. I got a lot of these. A lot of freckles, right? Eye color. Green. I've got the green eyes. You want blue, brown. We've got some options here. Length of toes. This might seem like an odd one. We'll revisit that later. Size of palms. Okay, this is another way that we can identify human morphology. So what are our plant relations, right? What about on the plant side? Is subject over 15 feet tall? Be a little frightening if we had a human being that tall. This works for plants. How many leaflets on each compound leaf? This is a really good way to identify things in the genus Dahlia. That's a really good, really great genus that we have a lot of in Texas. With about 10 species, I think. And then are leaves present when the plant is dormant, right? Is this a deciduous? Is it an evergreen, herbaceous plant? And does it have speckled bark? Speckled bark is a kind of an oddity in the New World. We have a lot of plants that are native to the East that have speckled bark, but not so many here in the US or in this hemisphere. And eye color, flower color. Okay, there's a good connection, right? There are only so many colors of flowers in the world. And then length of anthers. There's a more apt human connection here to make, but it seemed a little inappropriate given the audience. And then size of leaves, right? That's a big one. How large or how small are the leaves? And this is really going to help you isolate individual species. All right, here's a lot of really fancy, great pictures. I'm sorry if you're at home. This is going to be like tiny on your computer screen. But basically, these are 2 different diagrams that I find really, really, really useful. And I got to give credit to the Indiana Academy of Science for publishing this book for the Chicago region. these diagrams are the best ever. If you can access some of these materials online, and I gotta say, if you want to get kind of really dive into morphology and figuring out, leaf shape and serrated margins and all that stuff, like really good diagrams. And the Conservation Research Institute are the folks who are hosting this online. But if I were to narrow down probably what the most important things are for you to take from here, it would be these up here, leaf shape, right? And leaf position, alternate, opposite, and world leaves. These are really powerful indicators of what you're looking at. There are really good ways to tell alternate and opposite leaves apart. And if you look at those diagrams, you'll see that the alternate example has sessile leaves. This is when the leaves are growing directly on the stem of the plant, as opposed to petiolate leaves, which have a petiole, which if you're into bonsai, cutting a leaf right at the base of the petiole and leaving the petiole is a really good way to ramify your leaves. And then of course, world, these are, what you'll commonly find in plants like Monarda, which we just saw a beautiful picture of. And then on the flower side, I'd say this diagram is probably the most important, only because it'll teach you the individual parts of a flower. Most flowers that we find in plants are going to be monoecious. They contain both female and male parts. There are some exceptions to that. Diospyros texana, the Texas persimmon, that has male and female flowers. People are always asking me, either how do I get a male or how do I get a female persimmon? Well, the trick is to grow one and wait about 12 years. Sorry. People complain about that fruit left and right. If you haven't tried Texas persimmon fruit, time's coming up. You should grab you some before the raccoons get it. But this is a really good one because it teaches you all the parts of the actual flower. And of course, the morphology is going to change with each flower. The stamens, the pistils aren't always going to be in the same place. The anthers aren't always going to be in the same place. Depends on what family you're in, and even the individual species. So this is just a really good way to kind of familiarize yourself with that. And again, these diagrams are all free online. I highly recommend you go check them out. So with that out of the way, let's talk about some actual families. Let's get into the individual, what makes what. And so we're going to start with a pretty easy one. We're probably really familiar with the morphology of this family, and I'd say we at least recognize in this room at least one species I'm going to show you. The first one, tried and true, I got shade. What do I plant? Dermiscap. So Malvaviscus or arboreus, the one we have most commonly here in the hill country, you'll find a limestone soils, a lot of Stromundii. And you can notice immediately we have something about the leaves, right? There's almost this pentagonal shape. It almost has these, 5 sides, right? We're going to start seeing a recurring theme here in a second. What about Pavonia lacciopetala, right? This is rock rose. Yeah, we like this one. Again, we're seeing a similar leaf shape here. This isn't going to be very common further down the road, but for now, we're hanging out. We're pretty good. And then a Butylon fruticosa. Now, this is a really good photo because we have flowers, we have seeds, and we have leaves. And you can see the leaves are still kind of hanging on to that shape. We have a handful of Butylons, and you'll notice they have that interesting capsule where once the flower's pollinated, you get these individual chambers. If you would cut that in half, you would actually see, a circular capsule that has each, individual chambers where the seed is held. And that's a common theme in this family. So what about Sphaerosia angustifolia, right? That's our globe mallow. We have a lot of different globe mallows, and this one especially is, it's pretty regularly found in cultivation. If you have a dry hotspot, this is a champion in your garden. And then the Calirhos, these are the wine cups. We have annual and perennial species. And this one is, wow, I love the bloom. I love this variety because it has those white segments in between the petals. And it really helps you identify the kind of theme of this family, right? We have these individual white spaces in between 5 petals. And if you look at the Sphaerosia, again, even though it's kind of circular, we have 5 petals. The Abutylon, 5 petals. And that's the common theme here. Even on the Turk's cap, that's a kind of a closed world inflorescence, still has 5 petals. And so you'll notice in the genus Malvaceae, if you see something that has 5 petals, I mean, right away, you know what family you're in. So that's going to help you kind of narrow things down a little bit. And if you can find your family, typically you can start narrowing things down from there. And we'll talk about how to do that a little bit later. But let's tackle another family, right? Lamiaceae. We should all be pretty happy about seeing this one. We all love mints. This is the mint family. So Salvia coccinea, we know this one pretty well. We call this tropical sage. We see it a lot in the hill country. I even saw it in South Texas this past weekend. It was like a 6-foot tall plant. It was wild. They can get pretty large if they get a lot of shade. But again, we're pretty familiar with salvias. We have a lot in cultivation. It's a very popular plant, and it's very fragrant. Teucrium, this is coastal germander. This is kind of an odd one that you find sometimes on the Blackland Prairie. We'll find it sometimes in San Antonio if you go a little further northeast. But this is a really nice, just really handsome plant. The leaves are kind of reminiscent of Baccharis, but I really like this one. We had some that were donated to us from Wilco Plant Rescue, and I'm happy to put them in the garden. And then we also have Hedioma. I got to see some of these that were just, I mean, if you're out in the hill country and you're looking at plants, if you're on a slope, these are just going off this year. They're very prolific. And then Scutellaria germundiae, we have a lot of Scutellarias. We have about 14 species in the state of Texas, and they all, man, there are some weird Scutellarias. I'm keying this out right now, and it's work. It's work. The next one, we have that famous Monarda. This is, I don't know, one of my favorite Monardas. I really like the speckled pattern on this one. And these plants are all beautiful. You can't find an ugly Monarda in the world. So salvia's, kind of an indicator, but in Lamiaceae, we don't have a huge ongoing theme, but we do have this keel, kind of this landing pad for pollinators that's present right beneath the opening of the flower. You kind of have this spot where, a bee can gently land, and you can photograph it with your iNaturalist observations. But, you see a lot of common themes also in Lamiaceae, like fragrance. A guy I used to work for at Barn Springs Nursery, Willie Glenn, really great dude, would always tell people who came in saying, well, will the deer not eat? Well, they'll eat anything, trust me. But typically you want to stick to your S's. Smelly, square stems, is it soft? Is it, those are the, you stick to those indicators, silvery leaves, the S's. That's kind of what you can identify as a deer deterrent. And a lot of those qualities are found in this family. We see a lot of fragrant leaves in Lamiaceae. We see a lot of good smells, and we see a lot of square stems. That's something that we find a lot in salvias. And those are good indicators, but mostly focus on the flowers. There are a lot of other species will have kind of that landing pad, that keel, but it's going to be a really good indicator here. And most Lamiaceae are very small, 3 feet to 4 feet tall at most. Everyone's familiar. All the homies know the notorious DYC of asters. Those damn yellow composites. Case in point, Simpsia calla. I'd love to skip this family, but man, this is the largest family of flowering plants on the planet. We can't skip Asteraceae, no matter how much it gives us a headache. So one of the ways that you can really tell these apart, kind of hone in on this as we go, pay attention to the outside of the flower compared to the inside of the flower, right? So what about Engelmannia persistenia, right? This is another really popular plant in cultivation. You can pretty much find this at any garden center. Agrostina habanensis, really like this one, fragrant white mist flower. This is a nice shrubby example of Asteraceae. Not a lot of woody plants in this family. So this is kind of an outlier. Still not seeing a lot of common threads here, right? We're deviating from that yellow flower that we've seen. What about Vernonia baldwinii? Wow, the ironweeds, what an odd aster. Still not seeing a common thread here, are we? And then finally, let's talk about Liatris punctata. Again, get a ton of these from Wilco. Thank you, Ashley. And it's kind of similar, you know, maybe it has some elements of the Vernonia, some elements of the other yellow flowers. But one thing you can tell with the asters, if you have these big wide flowers, right? Especially on the Simpsia and the Engelmannia, you'll see that we have ray florets on the side, right? Ray flowers. In the center, we have disc flowers. And the disc flowers are the dead giveaway for asters. You can see the same thing on the Agritina, right? We have these pistils that are coming out. They're standing away from the flower. Those are your disc flowers. Again, same thing with the Vernonia. It's a really good up close shot of the blooms. You're going to see those protruding from the flower. Same thing with Liatris. So asters, kind of odd. You'll see a lot of kind of coriaceous leaves, rough to the touch. And you'll also see a lot of hairs in this family. Again, not a really large, you know, family of plants, more diminutive in size. Tons of plants, very ecologically successful. They're everywhere. They're on every continent except Antarctica, of course, but they're prolific. These plants are very successful and they have a very good survival strategy. They attract a ton of pollinators. And again, some of them can be very fragrant, like plants in Lamiaceae, but you're going to be able to identify them by that really bizarre flower shape. And look at asters, you know, take an identification, look at the genus and species, and now that you're in the Asteraceae family, and really start to pick apart the flowers, you know, pick one up, peel it open, like see really what the morphology of the flower looks like up close. Brassicaceae, I had a really tough time with this one because the majority of the plants in this family in Texas are introduced. They're either introduced from other countries or they're introduced from other states. So finding a true Texas native Brassica is tough. And they're weird. They're all strange. But these are kind of the plants that are responsible for this phenomenon we call plant blindness, where people will just look at a landscape and then the images just kind of go right past them. They don't really think too much about it. They don't really look into it very much. But we'll try and pick these apart because they have a very good indicator of their individual species. So this is Physaria gracilis. This is one that you'll probably see. This is pretty common. You know, you'll notice it kind of has that lettuce leaf shape where it has those lobes, those indentations, a very strong central vein. And then Lepidium, this is one that you're just gonna, I don't know. She seems to recognize it. We've got one in the room. Again, like diminutive small species, not very large. And so what about Diplotaxis? This is another odd one. You'll probably see this in more open spaces. If you're lucky enough to find a prairie that's relatively untouched, you'll probably see this mingling with other grasses. And then Streptanthus. Got a shout out Wendy here who gave a presentation on Streptanthus bracteatus a couple months ago. This is in that same genus. And you'll notice that this one has a similar shape, but it's not quite as, I don't think this one is quite as tall as bracteatus. And, but it's very, very, very similar flower. This is a really cool genus just in general. They're all pretty much annuals. And that's a common thread you'll see with the brassicas, especially in Texas, a lot of annuals. Tomostema, this is a cool one. This is a threatened species. Like if you come across this, like give me a call, shoot me an email. I'm gonna need to know about that. We're always looking for this one. It's, you know, just it's kind of in and out in certain parts of the country. It's found more commonly in other parts, other states. But what's the common thread here? Let's look at the flower and see if we can. That's right. All right, 4 petals. Yeah. So brassicas are all like this. Even when you plant your veggies and they bolt at the end of the season, look at the flowers. You know, you're going to be able to tell that that's a brassica. And again, if you see brassicas out in the wild, they're probably not native. Just going to throw that out there right now. The majority of them are going to be introduced, and some even invasive. And finally, we can talk about my favorite family. I love the legumes, Fabaceae. This is where my favorite plants in Texas are found. So I'll share a few of those with you. Well, be forewarned, I'm kind of the village arborist, so I like woody plants. I'll try and throw in some that aren't though. Indigofera, this is a really cool one. We often call these either the the false indigos, right? Or the indigos is kind of the label that they get. And this bears a striking resemblance to some of the flowers in Lamiaceae. You'll see that we have a kind of a similar morphology. The hood, right? Hood is peeled back, and we have a keel. We have that kind of landing pad. Neptunia, oh, really cool one. This is a semi-aquatic species. Some of them are fully aquatic. And you'll notice that female flowers are on one side, and then the male parts are on the other side. It has these kind of segmented parts for its flowers. Very interesting survival strategy there. And then Senegalia romeriana, one of the cat claws. You hate to brush up against this, love to smell it. It's one of those plants that is best enjoyed wafting by as you pass. But these plants, the Senegalias, gotta love me some acacias. I was in South Texas that found some really cool specimens of this recently. And then Eisenhardia texana, right, the kidney wood. This is one that you'll also find pretty regularly in cultivation. This is a really great plant, another fragrant plant, right? Very dependable bloomer in summer when all of your plants are just miserable from the heat. This guy will tough it out and will flower, rain, shine, tidal wave, whatever. Cinna hymeriana, right? So deviation from our flower strategy here. We have 3 very distinct flowers, all contained in the same family. What is the indicator for legumes? Pods, beans, the beans. Exactly, they're in the beans. The truth is in the beans. These pods have these segmented sections. The seeds will be individually placed in this kind of sealed capsule. There are a lot of plants that resemble this pod, but legumes, you'll always be able to tell them apart because the seeds are segmented in some way or another. They're separated from one another. Again, these plants are really great. Legumes are another really, really prolific species. Very ecologically diverse. A lot of them are nitrogen fixers, not every single one, but a ton of them are. And they're really great beneficial plants to have in the garden. And you can, I mean, typically the pea flower, that's indicative of the peas that you will grow in the garden, you'll find on things like those indigofores. You have a banner, you have a keel, they have that distinct shape. The Eisenhardia kind of has that similar line, but you'll also see, a lot of legumes that have that puffball flower. They're really famous for that, and they're pinnate foliage. Pinnate foliage is a really good way to tell legumes apart. Some of them are bipinnate or even tripinnate. You have a lot of, kind of variety. Some of them are larger. We have larger pinnate flowers like our mountain laurels, and some of them are much smaller like that Neptunia species right there. But either way, you should plant a legume. I don't care which one it is. Just put it in the garden. All right, let's practice again. Let's try and figure out what this is together. Okay. Yeah, we're getting there. A lot of indicators right here. Don't jump the gun, right? We've got a couple more pictures. I'm sure people are already like, Zach, it's this, obviously. What's the next one? Well, we have pods. We have bean pods. The crazy thing about these pods is that they're armed. The pods have spines. Okay, taking it seriously here. You don't want to get eaten until it's ready. And then I have that puffball flower, right? We have bright colors. We have these pinnate foliage. We have leaves with leaflets, right? And so this is bipinnate. You have one long leaf with these other leaves that come out with leaflets on it. Anyone want to guess what this one is? It's Mimosa borealis. This is the, help me out. Someone give me a common name. I blank on these all the time. Fragrant mimosa. Yes, thank you. But yeah, this is a really good one. You'll find this in the hill country a lot and even some in South Texas. This is a nice, handsome shrub. It's a little prickly to brush up against, but what a stunner in the garden. Beautiful flowers, dependable bloomer, great for pollinators. Plant one. So if we kind of can narrow things down by family, right, we can kind of get lower on that taxonomic pyramid. How do we really figure out what it is? Like, we really need to hone in on the individual species. And I got to tell you, the easiest way to do that is to understand where you are, where you're standing, what's your geographic region. So let's talk about ecoregions a little bit. This is probably my favorite part of this whole presentation that I give. Here you'll see, this is on the right, we have the level 4 ecoregion map. This is what most people who are doing botanical science use in the state of Texas. It's hyper detailed. It's very, very, very specific, and it's honing in on individual traits. And if you look at the map to the left, that's our soil map of Texas. You're going to see a little bit of similarities, right? Especially in the Blackland Prairie. When you look at the Blackland Prairie, which is that nice kind of dark brown spot there on the right half of the state, that is, wow, look at that compared to the soil map. It's like night and day. And then you can look over, you'll see that we have a couple different soil types, a few in the Edwards Plateau, and then the Panhandle is just a hot mess. So is West Texas, but I think that's where you're going to find a lot of biodiversity. And you'll see kind of things hang to certain waterways, or they adhere to certain geologic events in our history. I really like the South Texas ecoregions that kind of hang along the Rio Grande. It's just really cool to see how those alluvial soils affect the landscape. And you'll find that the plant species kind of adhere to this soil region. There are some plants that need a very, very, very specific soil that will only grow on that soil. So let's narrow down a little bit. That was a lot of information. That was a lot of colors. That was a lot of words. But let's focus on just kind of Bexar County and our neighbors. If you're in Bexar County, drive immediately outside of Bexar County, you're going to encounter 4 different ecoregions. Now, the first one is the Balcones Canyon. I got to watch the eclipse out here. I was beautiful. I was in this valley, and I got to watch the shadow come down the valley.
Oh, wow.
And it was remarkable, especially in the hill country, just beautiful. And this is one of my favorite places to go and collect. You have these deep canyons with this insane amount of biodiversity, with so many oaks out there, so many oaks. And just what an exceptional landscape that you won't find anywhere else in the country. And then the northern Blackland Prairie, which is ironic because it's basically all the way south. It's the whole western strip of the Blackland Prairie. And this is where most of San Antonio sits, Sorry, you live in San Antonio, you got to deal with hot and clay. That's what you get. But this is a really unique ecotype, and we have all these really beautiful prairie plants that grow, grasses, we have forbs, we have all this really cool stuff on the Blackland Prairie. And, we're pretty lucky to have something so unique here in Texas. The northern Nueces alluvial plains. There's a lot of words to say. Well, it's kind of hot, it's kind of dry, it's kind of sandy a little bit, and there may have been water here at some point. I was at the Dry Frio this past weekend, and very indicative of the alluvial plains. And you'll see some really interesting soil types here too. And if you have the chance to kind of hang around South Texas, going all the way down along the river, you'll see some pretty striking things. And then, of course, we have the southern post oak savanna. And I get asked a lot what defines a savanna. And really, savanna is like, well, you've got some grasses, you got some plains, and you've got some trees, but not too much of either. Okay. And you'll see like Quercus stellata is the dominant tree there. It makes up most of the spots that have canopy, but they're mostly individual, kind of isolated trees. You won't see a lot of them in groups. You don't have forests on a savanna. So the wider influence of the ecology, how are we going to narrow this down a little bit further? Let's kind of talk about the importance of ecoregions. Epigenetics, another big word. Told you I was going to use big words. This one is the study of heritable traits or a stable change of cell function that happen without changes to the DNA sequence. Blah, 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 blah. Words mean things. And this means basically that certain DNA reacts differently. These physical plant traits are different depending on their ecoregion, depending on their soil type. It might be the same species, but they're going to present those genetics in a different way. Environmental stressors affect what our plants look like. And so that's going to affect whether you see, Sinolin hymeri, your cinnas, are they on the Balcones escarpment, or are you south? Are you in South Texas? Are you on the Blackland Prairie? Those genetics are going to present themselves differently depending on where you are. It's really important to, pinpoint what you're standing on. And then plants express these epigenetic changes morphologically, and this leads to variations like varieties. When you see a plant description as that VAR, that's what variety means. It's sometimes abbreviated with a V, and this means that you have a plant that's the same species, but wow, we can't really call that the same species, can we? It has some different morphological traits. Physical traits don't necessarily change the DNA of a plant. We want to identify species by DNA, not just by how they look. That's how we have the mess of taxonomy that was 50 years ago. And these are heavily involved in modern agricultural practices, right? We alter and we select traits that we want for the plants that we grow and eat. We need plants that can survive outside of their native range. If we didn't do that, well, people wouldn't eat as much corn, I guess. There's things like that. We have tomatoes, which if tomatoes could speak, they would beg for mercy because it's so hot here, but we do have some tomatoes that can make it despite the 108-degree summers we have. So we kind of narrow this down with plant keys. And this is a really good way for you to look at either an individual family, or I like to look at individual genus, like to make keys for certain genera. And this really will help you, if you know where you're standing, narrow down by some traits, morphological traits. And you can even include varieties and things in these keys. And so it allows you to filter that list to a wider pool, from a wider pool, because when you look at a plant family or even a genus, you'll see that we have, Texas is huge. We do have a lot of biodiversity, but, create your own key by researching known plants in that region using easily accessible information. That's the whole point of this presentation, is telling you about how easy it is to access this info. You have iNaturalist. We spent a lot of time talking about it today. So use that. It's a very valuable tool, allow you to look at maps, kind of filter things through. And, plus you don't have to carry around this 10-pound textbook in your backpack. Carry water, not books. Texas is home to about 5.8 thousand taxa spread across 12 ecoregions. That means Texas houses around a quarter of the biodiversity of the US. Pretty insane to think about. They're not contained only in Texas, but in total, we house about a quarter. So when you're talking about that many species, just not what's in the US, but just what's in Texas, you're going to have a big number. Know what's in your county. Know what you're standing on. So the last thing I'll talk about is kind of how we narrow this down. We like to talk about maps. I showed you some fun maps. They're really fun, but this is a really great resource. It's shaped like a key. No, unfortunately, it's much more complicated than that. Here's an example of a key that's created for a family, right? This is very widespread. This is not at all specific. This is narrowing down by genera. It's your job to find the species. So this is a lot of information, and you're having to know some very, very specific botanic terms. Well, that's not very useful if you're looking at species in your ecoregion, right? If you're just looking at what's in your backyard, this is not going to help you very much. So what I like to do is to narrow things down even further. So this is all the dahlia species in and around Bexar County. So this is just the things you can kind of narrow this down. You can use iNaturalist for this, whatever map resource you want to use. But basically, this is taking some very simple traits and isolating them down to something that's easily digestible. This is something that you can reference in the field. You can keep this in your pocket, on your phone, whatever. And this is just an Excel spreadsheet. And this is basically just going through some very simple details. So if I find something that's very similar, one, I can know right away by the flower color. I've eliminated at least half of the other species on this key just by knowing what color the bloom is. Then I can look at the shape of the bloom. Dahlias have these terminal ends, and they also have thin spikes, conical spikes. Some of them are rounded in shape. There are only a handful that have at least overlapping features. And you'll notice that even the ones that have overlapping flower shapes don't necessarily have the same flower color. Again, this is a way for us to filter through. And if things aren't really in bloom yet and the flowers haven't really emerged, you can still depend on the shape of the bloom to kind of put you in the right corner. And then how many leaflets does it have? these are legumes, they're pinnate. So we can count the leaflets on each individual leaf, and that again can narrow it down. And then you'll see these are all the list of species that you'll find. And hopefully you get the chance to photograph some of these this month, because they are all blooming and they are all beautiful. Dahlias and great genus. And the resource that I like to use most for my maps is BONAP. Funny name, great resource. It's a little out of date. It's about 10, 11 years at this point. Actually, probably more than that. But it still is a really key resource for identifying where things are. And basically, when you look at a genus, this is what it will give you, right? We're talking about all the dahlias that are found in the US. That's a lot of plants. And you're going to see here, this will help you determine what's actually in your county, what's in the area that you're in. So if you're going to go out to West Texas and you want to know what dahlias you're looking at, well, it's pretty simple. You can go on BONAP and you can say, oh, look, it looks like Cilantроseps is pretty rare in West Texas. The yellow icon means that it's rare. So you can know, okay, I know that this plant is going to occur here. Let me look it up. Let me see what the traits of this individual plant are, so I can know when I find it. And that's a really good way for you to narrow things down and really, do some homework before you go. Learn the geology, the soil, and the plants before you go on your vacation, so you're not just constantly confused. And then I like to give you guys some good resources to send you out into the world with. If you have any questions about me, the garden, the work that Michael and I do, or anything like that, just shoot me an email. We're always happy to hear from you. If you're curious about the program, we like to have volunteers. It's a little touch and go with our volunteers. We like to have as many dedicated people working in the greenhouses with us. We do a lot of weird work, and we always are dependent on the help that we get to kind of push that along. So some of the resources I'll give you real quick. Maps. We talked about BONAP just now, but also the USDA has some good ones. They're also pretty out of date. What are you going to do? But they're still pretty solid. You can depend on some of these from researchers who have been in the area, who can kind of answer some of these questions for you. And then the online resources I recommend, besides the two above, would be SciNet. This is really good for Southwest plants. And also Brit has a wonderful wealth of information on their website. This is the Fort Worth Botanical Gardens project. And we know a couple of folks over there who do some really solid work. And they are working on getting some of these old, tomes, these huge $1,000 hardback books available as an online resource. So I really highly recommend, if you want to do some deep diving and reading, they have some really good stuff on their site. And then also, if you're into the dusty old books like I am, you can look at a few of these. The Flora of North America, this is one that is really mostly available online now. If you find a physical copy, you struck gold. Also struck gold with the Manual of the Vascular Plants of Texas. Ooh, this is one of those heavy ones. Insanely good information in this book. Very, very thorough. It will really help you identify what you're looking at. Some of it, it was written in the 60s, 70s. It's pretty out of date. So some things have moved around on the taxonomic plane. They're not all in the same place. But still, the species information is par none. And then Wildflowers of Texas, Michael Eason, shameless plug there. He's a really good field guide. I'm not just saying that. It's excellent. I really like it a lot. I use it frequently, and it's organized really well. Michael has sourced all the photos either himself or through his friends, and it's just chef's kiss. Botanist vocabulary. This is one of my favorite resources. I actually picked this up when I was at Big Bend National Park one year. And this is just kind of a visual dictionary of all the terms that you'll come across when you're reading all the above resources, right? You're going to see a lot of confusing words like sessile and pinnate, and these will help you narrow those down. Or schizocard. Schizocard's a fun one. And so this is a resource to kind of, if you're going through these texts, if you're going through this information, this will really help you kind of speed the process up, educate yourself as you go, so you're not just overwhelmed with that information. And with that, I'll say thank you. I think we're supposed to ask some questions now, right?
Yes, but let's see. We
Yes, sir, Jerry.
I found iNaturalist right now, with the number of observations, is actually equaling some of these other ones because I'm starting to use that as a good source because you've got a lot of observers out in the field, and it's probably good as the USDA on this right now.
I would agree with that. Jerry's saying that iNaturalist is rivaling these outdated map sources. And I will say, like, I never look at a species without pulling up a map of those observations on iNaturalist. And especially when I was looking at brassicas, you can really see how things are introduced. If something is located heavily in Illinois and there's 1 or 2 observations in Texas, that's not a Texas species. And it's a US native, but that's not necessarily a Texas native. So yeah, I would agree. I think there are some pitfalls with iNaturalist, but I think there are enough people educated who are on the platform who are making sure that the observations are accurate, so the algorithm is accurate. I will say, disclaimer, if you find a critically endangered species, please don't post it to iNaturalist. Please don't do that.
Gather it.
Right, or collect it. Please don't poach plants. I mean, I shouldn't have. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but don't poach your plants, people. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I had something I wanted to show you, and then we can show everybody else maybe, except I can't figure out. Oh, I don't want that. I can't figure out how to use my phone.
We have a visual aid from the audience.
Lee Marlowe gave the Whitty Museum some herbarium sheets. And do you remember when you made that donation to us?
Well, it wasn't me personally.
Oh.
The San Antonio River Authority scanned Native Plant Society, San Antonio Chapter Native Plant Society of Texas samples. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah, so that was through the San Antonio chapter, partnering with San Antonio River Authority that scanned them and gave them to the Whitty. Yes.
Yes, well, I'm the one who's doing the data entries. So anybody can look them up and, I mean, all over the world, like, museums do with all their stuff. And there's another one, not the one I was going to say that you gave us, but one we got from the Missouri Botanical Garden.
Oh, cool.
And I have a photograph of it right here, but I don't seem to be able to find it. It is a yellow composite. It was collected around Comanche Springs, which I think is outside of New Braunfels, by guess who? Lindheimer in 1850.
Wow,
We
we're getting a
have
history
that.
lesson
Yeah.
if you're at home and you're not going to hear this really cool repartee.
Yeah, it was just like the girl who was doing it, she's another master naturalist. It was just like, oh my God.
So we're talking about herbarium specimens, which for those of you who don't know or are at home, herbarium are places where herbaria where they collect, and Fort Worth Botanical Garden has a really good one in Texas.
There it is.
But they collect these plant pressings. It's where you would take the plant material, you press it, you send it off, and it's kind of a dehydrated specimen that can be referenced for scientific purposes later. We can also get DNA from these herbarium specimens. And Native Plant Society, San Antonio chapter, collected some, and they're in display on the Whitty.
It's right there. And,
wow.
And you can also make it larger if you'd like to. I hate to even touch it because I always screw it up. Okay. And there you can read that to them.
Okay, so this is an herbarium specimen from Missouri Botanical Garden. Another great garden. They have a really good website. But this is a Senecio obovadus rotundus, and it was collected by D. Lindheimer.
And it says like 18.
Yeah, timestamped 1850, ladies and gentlemen. This is at the Whitty?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's pretty amazing. Go to the Whitty Museum. That's beautiful.
I'll just try and keep it right here if anybody wants to look at it.
Yes, thank you. That was fun.
This is
Go ahead.
okay, here's the plant right here. And it was pressed by Lindheimer.
Sorry, one more time.
Yeah. How do you feel about
I'm not familiar with it.
Could you repeat that for everybody else?
Yeah, Gaeta.
Texas wildflowers.
Okay, Texas wildflowers.
I'll send you a copy of the picture of that on the book.
Yeah, please do. I'm always open to any kind of physical resource for the field.
She has sorted her book much like you sorted the dahlia family.
Oh,
First with colors and the blooms and then so forth.
what was the last name of the author?
Adulus.
Adulus.
It's Cherokee.
Oh,
AJ. I'll send it to you.
please do. Yeah, get, I'm going to butcher this a little bit. Adulus.
G-Y-A-T-A.
Yeah, Geyata. She's Cherokee. She has a really wonderful resource on native plants, and apparently her keys are organized the same way that mine was.
Yeah.
So that's pretty helpful. Those are good keys. Kind of takes the guesswork out of it for you. There are a lot of good resources. I will say, like, if you're going to get into plant keys, it's a mess. It's a real rat's nest.
Zach, did you make that key for dahlias, or did you make some for others?
I did make that for dahlia. Yeah, I have a handful of other ones. The one that I've put off a little bit is the Scutellaria genus, of all the Scutellaria in Texas. And that one is pretty wild. You need several columns to narrow that one down. But yeah, they're really only, if you know what you're looking at and the information is in your hands, it takes you like maybe an hour, you know, and on an Excel spreadsheet, and you'll have something you can take with you forever.
Do you share the, I know some people have shared similar types of information on iNat. Do you do iNat?
I've been known to be on iNat, and I'm happy to share these keys with other people. I'm not as active. I mostly use iNaturalist as a resource, just to kind of like geographically pin things down. If I find something really cool that I want people to know about, or if I'm looking at something and I have some free time, what is this? I post a lot of lizards and insects to iNat. Yeah, but mostly I use it as kind of a resource. But yeah, if anyone wants a plant key, send me an email.
Are there any more questions in the room? There's one right there.
Yes.
I use Seek. Is it a baby of iNaturalist? Because it's like for stupid people?
Is Seek iNaturalist for stupid people? No. I think Seek is just fine. In fact, I prefer to use a lot of those third-party apps, like not iNaturalist, something else that's more generalist if I'm trying to identify like a house plant for somebody, like a tropical that's been cultivated and brought in, because I mean, it doesn't really need to be on iNaturalist in my opinion. I kind of reserve that for native species or things that are at least like in the wild. I do.
Does it use the same database?
I don't think it uses the same database. Oh, okay, it does use the same database.
Yeah.
So that means it's the same algorithm as well. Okay, interesting. Yeah, Seek is one that has been recommended to me before. I've also looked at PlantNet, but PlantNet is kind of like a subscription based. I hear Seek is pretty good.
I need to tell you there's a comment on here because you're not going to see it. And the comment
I'd love to hear
is, I'm Zach's mom.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for attending tonight.
Any more questions in the room? We're running out of time, but if there's any more questions? Okay.
Oh, my arch nemesis is asking a question.
So I often, you can help me that. I often get stuck with the rosettes or the initial leafage of plants, even in my garden where I planted some of those.
Yep.
Any tips about that?
Any tips about rosettes? Rosettes are really tricky because typically rosettes appear either on monocots, where you really can't tell what's what until you kind of see some older leaves. And this is also true with dicots, dicotyledonous plants, two starter leaves, those cotyledons. With rosettes, I would say definitely check your undersides of the leaves. Look at leaf margins. Leaf margins can give a lot of stuff away, even at a young age. But rosettes are really tough because they kind of harken back to an ancient lineage, evolutionary advantage. And, you know, that's kind of like, there are a lot of plants that do that, either trap moisture or to stop moisture from escaping the plant. I would say look at all parts of the plant and definitely, you know, give them a gentle pet. Are they smooth? Are they rough? Coriaceous? Are they whatever? And that's probably going to be your best indication. Unfortunately, with rosettes, sometimes the only way you can really narrow it down further is to dig the plant up. Look at the roots, which you don't want to do with a plant that young, not in the garden at least. All right.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.